So we continue the conversation about debt and what's happening in the country. And we have a guest who's joined us now in the studio. Bernard Muchere is a fraud risk management consultant with an organization called Zerot Fraud Risk Management Consultants Limited. He's previously worked at the National Treasury and the Debt Management Office. He's retired from that. Now he's doing his own thing. See, the thing about people retiring too early, 60 and 60, it's too young.
Oh, it's too young, is it?
Come on.
It's time to do other things.
Yes. Bernard, good morning.
Morning to you.
Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Karibu sana. You retired from the government?
I retired.
Voluntary retirement or?
After 60 years.
See.
Was in 2018.
Yeah. So I'm saying it's too early to tell people to retire at 60. 60, that's at your height, the peak of your everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Surely. Anyway, Bernard, karibu sana.
Thank you.
To welcome you to the show, let me give you the day's proverb. It's a proverb from Botswana. It says, "A man's friends are as many as his enemies." A man's friends are as many as his enemies.
Yes.
What do you think that means?
Man's friend is as many as his friends.
As his enemies.
As his enemies.
Yes.
That one can mean even your friends could be your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it could be the same people.
It could be the same people.
You say you have 10 friends. Just know that you also have 10 enemies. Okay.
Yes.
You worked at the National Treasury in the Debt Management Office.
I worked in the National Treasury in the Internal Audit Department.
Mm-hmm. Internal Debt Department.
Internal Audit Department.
Audit.
Yes.
Okay.
Under the Internal Auditor General.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What does that department do?
That department is the internal auditor. You are there to add value through giving assurance that the objectives of that particular organization is being accomplished. Yeah. So you are part of the internal control. So you evaluate the management, governance, and everything to ensure the objective of that particular organization is achieved.
So what were you auditing? Were you auditing the expenditures, for example, within the Ministry of Finance? Or are you auditing the work that the Ministry of Finance is doing? For example, signing of multilateral, bilateral, whatever kind of loans we are signing, the amount coming in and how that is being utilized. The National Treasury, of course, the Ministry of Finance is an executive ministry, so it's the one that is receiving money from and deciding how money is being spent.
The National Treasury actually manages the public finance, and the public finance management cut across all the government entities. So, as the internal auditor, you are seconded to any department, any government department.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I worked in the districts. We were the first people who were focused, the so-called district focus for rural development. So we went to the districts. So in that, when you're in the districts, you audit every department of the government. For some time, quite a number of years, I was in the district. I left the district. I came to Nairobi. In Nairobi now, you are posted to department, like I worked in the National Youth Service. I was the internal auditor in charge there. From there, I left to the Ministry of Public Works, with the internal auditor in charge. From there, I went to the Ministry of Enterprise Development. when it was combined, about 5 or so ministries. From there, I went to the Ministry of East Africa, Commerce, and Tourism. I was transferred to the Ministry of Health, the famous Murphy House Scandal. Then to the headquarters, then home.
Upon retirement.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So, Bernard, you're here today because we want to continue our conversation that we've been having the last couple of... We're in the budget cycle. We are right at the heat of budget making.
Yes.
We have the finance bill that's been published. Public participation is taking place now with the National Assembly. Soon we'll now get to understand the full effect of the next financial year's budget. Of course, one of the big ticket items in the next financial year is repayment of debt.
Yes.
And our debt is now at close to 9 trillion shillings.
Yes.
A lot of it has been borrowed in the last 9 years, right? In that time of around 9 years,
Yes.
you are in the treasury for that time. You know what was being borrowed, the reasons that were being given for borrowing this money,
Yes.
and where the money was going. Okay, let's start with, is it true that our national debt burden is 9 trillion shillings?
I also got astonished when I heard it 9 trillion. So what I did, I took as a Kenyan. I'm a Kenyan citizen and a shareholder of this country. And now I have retired almost 5 years outside there. I have a duty as a citizen to see to it that our country is being run perfectly. You remember our president, I think we were with him yesterday. He said that everybody should take his role, contribute the little you can. Me being a certified fraud examiner, that I'm an anti-fraud expert. Anti-fraud expert is an economic crime expert, biased towards that branch of economic, which we call occupation fraud and abuse. When I looked at the books, because public debt is part of public finance management. And public finance management, the definition of public finance management is the set of laws, rules, procedures, and systems that a government entity uses to source for funds, allocate funds, expend, audit, and what have you. So finally, they produce books. And those books are supposed to be for the Kenyans, citizens like you, and the other one, because we are all shareholders. Like when you go to your company or you go to your cooperative, they usually give you books to show how they are
performed.
Likewise, the government produces books for us. You go to Ministry of Finance, they are all budget books. You go to central bank, the banks for the government, so it produces the data, the statement of the money. I looked at all those books. And when I look at what we have borrowed, we have a debt stock of 1.45. We paid 7 trillion. We have used our tax revenue because any country does not develop or finance its activities through debt. That is one thing you should understand. We finance our activities through tax because the government gets its revenue from taxation. So we should finance our activities because even what we are borrowing from outside, it is taxes for the others.
Yeah.
So now, when I added all that for the 9 financial years, it means the finances we used for projects came to about 19 trillion.
The finances we used for?
For 9 years. If you add now the debt stock, debt stock means what? Outstanding debt.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Which that is what you have left to pay. We have paid 7 trillion. And we pay our debt using our taxes. So even when we borrow, we don't borrow to pay with
we don't
debt.
borrow a loan to pay.
Finally, everything will be paid from our
taxes.
Taxes. Okay, can I ask a question? If we're looking at 19 trillion, what you're saying is that what is still owed by Kenya today in terms of debt is that what you're saying?
You know what?
The money that has been borrowed for projects was 19 trillion in 9 years.
That is what should be because you see, we have paid 7 trillion. What was we paying? Debt, isn't it?
Okay.
We paid debt.
So we have been paying since 2013. Every year we've been paying some debt.
Yes.
And what you're saying is that in those 9 years, we've paid 7 trillion shillings.
I did the audit between 2014, 2015, up to 2022, 2023.
Okay.
I looked at that.
The current financial year.
Yeah.
So the money owed.
The money owed, according to the report,
Yes.
Is 9.
it's 9.
9 trillion.
9 trillion.
And this money, from what you've said as well,
Yes.
was being borrowed for projects.
Yes, because because the law is very clear that we borrow to finance development expenditure.
Okay, but there's a question I'm asking here.
Yes.
Was this money borrowed for projects? I know what the law says.
Yes.
But was this money borrowed for projects?
That is what. Sorry. That is what. That is the question now.
You were right there.
Yeah.
You were right there. You did an audit. So I'm asking,
Yes.
this money that was borrowed, was it borrowed for projects?
If I compare the projects, because within those 9 years, the projects are worth 6 trillion. You see, according to the projects, because they are in the development expenditure. That's where the projects are. Because the budget is divided into two: recurrent and development. Development expenditure is the development expenditure. Development expenditure is purely for projects. We are together.
Yep.
So anything outside there, then it should not be for project, unless those projects are not approved, are not authorized. And everything is authorized under
The budget.
the budget.
Yes.
Because the budget is the Appropriation Act.
Yes.
That is the law. And that is the law we make. So when I looked at all the Appropriation Acts for development for the 9 years, it amounted to 6 trillion.
Okay.
So you can see those are the projects.
Okay.
But when you add all the debts, including what we are paid, because we are paying the debt, we pay debt from the current expenditure. had an account called public debt account. So you only go to the current expenditure, extract what has been paid, which was amounting now for 9 years, 7 trillion. Mm-hmm. Now, in the development expenditure, we have two things. We have tax to finance the development, and we have the loans, which are clearly indicated in the
budget.
In the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But now, in the course of my audit, I realized it's as if we have two budgets. The budget which comes from treasury, and when the cabinet secretary is preparing the statement of actual expenditure, actual revenue, and exchequer issue, you find there is another budget, which is different from
what was approved by Parliament.
From what was approved. And that's why, if you go now to the Gazette notice, because the Gazette, sorry.
I think Edna can pick the phone, and keep the phone for you outside there.
Let me, sorry, because maybe we'll get some things here.
Let me ask the question now from the beginning. Let's start with at the budget. Okay? So in the budget, you have two things that have been done.
Yes.
In the budget, there is what has come in as the projects and the plans for the government to spend in a financial year. Say in 2014, 2015, these are the projects, development projects, and this is how much it's going to cost us. Okay?
Yeah.
And we know the deficit. So if we have a deficit of 300 billion and the projects are 1.2 trillion, we know the rest is going to come from the loan.
Let me first of all tell you, correct, maybe when a budget is being taken to Parliament, it's actually balanced. If you go to Section 33, Regulation 33, the budget when it's being taken to Parliament is balanced. That is, you have taken care of the deficit by showing the borrowings you are going to undertake.
Yes.
And the borrowings are only shown in the development
budget.
Yeah. Because you know the law says you can only borrow to finance development.
Yeah.
So when the cabinet secretary of treasury is taking the budget to Parliament, it is balanced. It's not deficit. There's no deficit. Because it clearly shows.
Yeah. So so using the same words.
Yes.
So at that point in the budget, you know this is the development budget for this year.
Yes.
This much is expected to come from revenue, and this much will come from loans.
Yes.
So basically, you're asking Parliament to approve for you to go and borrow that amount.
Yes, and in most cases, you'll find already the loan has been signed.
The loan has already been secured.
Yes, secured.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we know, for example, in 1 year, let's say it's 500 billion shillings.
Yes.
And then the next year, it's X amount.
Yes.
That is what you're saying now. Between 2014 and this current financial year, the amount of money that has been appropriated as development totals 6 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Out of that 6 trillion shillings that has been appropriated for development in those years, how much of it was appropriated to come from loans? Debt financing. Was it the full 6 trillion?
No, it was 6 trillion. Amount financed by taxes was 3.7 trillion.
So the balance?
The balance of 2.29 was from tax.
So that was coming from debt?
Debts.
From debt?
Yes. And it is earmarked for each project.
Okay.
Money is earmarked for each project.
And this is the total?
This is the total.
2.29 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Is the total budget approved by Parliament?
Yes.
To the total loan approved by Parliament since 2014?
2014, 2015, up to
now.
2022, 2023.
To 2023.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yet, in our debt books, it shows that between 2014 to the current financial year,
Yes.
we have borrowed 6 trillion shillings or thereabouts.
Yes.
About 2.1 trillion in the first 5 years,
Yes.
4 point something trillion in the second 5 years.
Exactly.
So where was this money going?
Because what happened is this. When I looked at the budget, the budget book,
Yeah.
then I went to the statement of actual revenue
Yeah.
and exchequer issues, which is gazetted every. That's where now I found the cabinet secretary posted printed estimates, which were different. You know what I mean? Different from the ones which were
Passed in Parliament.
And at that point, you find now domestic debt, which were not in the approval, have been introduced.
Okay, that's serious though, from what you're saying.
Yes.
And under what circumstances would that happen? That the cabinet secretary then is now posting results, and we're talking about in the year 2022, 2023.
Yes.
Isn't it? Or
Yes.
we're talking about a different year here. So we're saying that that the posted was different from what was given in Parliament.
Yes.
Under what circumstances would that be? Could there have been a mistake? Why would it be that you would have two different rows of numbers?
That is the biggest question. Because ordinarily you'd expect the printed estimates, which are going to be posted in the statement of actual revenue, and exchequer issue should be the same as the ones in the Appropriation Act. But now when you go to that statement, you will see very different printed estimates. And if you go to now for 2022, 2023, because I have the table for all the years, you'll find the posted domestic debt of about 1.04 trillion domestic debts. And remember, you can only borrow to finance what? Development. But if you go now to the Development Appropriation Act, that is the budget, you find the total, the gross expenditure was 700 billion.
Yeah.
Over 711 billion. You see? But there was no domestic debt.
Debt there. Was there foreign debt?
Yes, the external debt were 292
billion.
If you go to that book, because I was actually looking at the books which have been published.
Okay.
The way they are published. So the question I asked is this: where did this one? Which law give the cabinet secretary the power to legislate? Because there is registration now. And borrow
in excess of this
domestic debt, which are not in the Appropriation Act, because the budget is the Appropriation Act.
Whenever the government borrows domestically,
Yes.
is that also captured in the Appropriations Act? Does the Appropriations Act only mention debt and then leave it to the cabinet secretary to seek that debt, whether domestically or externally? Or does it specify in the Appropriations Act?
In the Appropriation Act, it clearly specifies even who is going to rent the money.
So
even the
domestic, X external.
Yeah. Come again?
It will be X domestic, X amount coming from domestic.
Yes.
Why amount coming from external?
Yes, but in this particular case, there's no domestic debt in the Appropriation Act.
No.
And remember, we only borrow for two purposes. To finance the development expenditure and for cash flow management.
Yes.
So in most cases, the domestic debts are borrowed to manage cash flow. To manage cash flow. And that should be short-term borrowing. Because the law is very clear. Short-term borrowing is only strictly for management of
Cash flow.
Cash flow.
Cash flow.
The
What
medium term.
What is short term?
Yeah?
What is short term? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
Yes. But the law is very clear. They cannot go beyond 1 year.
Okay.
It should be cleared within 1 year. They cannot go beyond 1 year. Yes. So now, when you find something which is going to go beyond 1 year, that is medium term. And that medium term must be for development expenditure.
Okay.
And development expenditure is clearly defined in the PFM Act as expenditure to create assets or to renew assets. That's the definition. So you cannot borrow medium term for anything else.
Let's take a break. And then when you come back, Mr. Bernard Muchere, you'll explain to us. So from your findings, from this audit that you've done, where has our money gone to? So the money has been borrowed, okay.
Yes.
The money has been spent, okay. We have repaid some debts, okay. And you're saying this whole thing, if you add it up, it comes to around 19 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
But clearly not. So where has the money gone to? Now let's get to understand the result of what you found with regards to our debt. And the questions are, how was our debt procured? How was our debt used? And how much have we paid? You say we have paid from our recurrent expenditure over the last, since 2014 to this year, we've paid 6 million shillings, 6 trillion shillings. Am I right?
7 trillion. Okay.
7 trillion.
Yes.
We have paid, over the last 9 years, we've paid 7 trillion shillings as debt.
Yes.
Against an approved borrowing of 2.29 trillion shillings.
Yes.
But then our debt register reads 9 trillion
9
shillings.
trillion shillings.
Seems to me that it's a 6.7 trillion plus 2.29 comes to about 9
About 9 trillion.
Yeah. Sounds to me like, we are talking about the same thing. Why is it that we have a balance? When we say our debt register reads 9 trillion,
Yes.
what does that mean? Does it mean that we owe people 9 trillion shillings? Or does that mean that what we have been dealing with in terms of debt so far is 9 trillion shillings?
When you say there's a debt stock of 9 trillion shillings, you remember that is the one they are seeking to increase the ceiling
Yes.
because we have 9 trillion. So that is the outstanding debt.
What Kenya owes is 9
What-
trillion.
Yes. After paying, because you cannot seek to increase a ceiling if you have already reduced.
If you've reduced it.
The most interesting thing is that we've been paying, but instead we still increase. We want to increase the ceiling.
So our debt stock right now stands at that 9 trillion.
9 trillion.
That 9 trillion, is it a combination of principal plus interest? Or is it only principal?
It should be principal because interest is paid when interest is considered when you are paying. That is the time you consider interest.
Okay.
Yes. So the most interesting thing when I looked at now, I told you that payment is done in the current expenditure.
Yes.
It's an account called public debt account. And I looked at the payments for the last 9 years. And the external debts, I hand the data from CBK up to somewhere 2022. Okay, I got everything because even the books now, the public, the Appropriation Act shows the payment. They give the estimates of what they are going to pay. So I considered even if we have not completed the financial year, I got the figure which is there. Then it means the amount they paid for the principal is 1.263 trillion. And interest paid was 835.9 something trillion. I mean, billion, sorry, billions. So now, if you look at that, I did some calculations. And I found that what was approved, the debt was approved, which is in the Development Appropriation Act. It's about, then, if you subtract from the debt, the external debt, and the debt which was carried forward before 2014, 2015, then the debt stock should be 3.4 trillion. Now, the most interesting thing I found is in the domestic debt. When I looked at the domestic debt, I found a very interesting scenario. I tried to ask myself, these domestic debt which are not approved, they are using it to do what? I did a table and tried to compare the domestic debt against the payment. Like you find, for example, I just pick one, like in 2022, 2023, in the actual, in the statement of actual revenue, an exchequer issue, the domestic debt was captured as 1.1 trillion. And the payments, and remember we pay from our taxes, is again 1.0 something trillion. You see?
Like everything we are raising in revenue, we are paying.
Yes. So, from where I stand, when I looked at the scenario, it is as if we are paying, we are borrowing, and the taxes are paying the borrowing.
The debt.
Instead of using the taxes
to pay
our expenditure, the current expenditure.
We've been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
We are borrowing, and then we are using our tax to pay. Why don't we use the tax straight away, directly?
What would be the explanation for this?
When I looked at it, probably the explanation would be the timing difference. But when you talk about timing difference of collection of taxes, that is taken care of. That is what we call cash flow, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that is taken care of the short term, not the long term.
Okay.
Yes. So now, when you look at that scenario, if you look at that table, there is a serious lack of financial prudency. Because why borrow?
To use the same money to pay.
And then you use your taxes to pay. That is the reason why you find. And when you are paying, the interest is very high. For example now, for this financial year, I'm sticking this up because all of them are almost the same. After borrowing 1.30 trillion, 1.040 trillion,
Yeah.
The principal, we paid 461 billion, point something billion. And the interest is 553 billion. That is where
Very high. That's very high.
That is where I found the biggest problem here. And this is where it requires to be looked at. Why are we borrowing and we have taxes? Because you see, when you borrow, you pay with the taxes.
But from
Tax
what you're
revenue,
saying,
yeah.
from what you're saying, that continues to be. It continues to be that taxes are used to pay the debts.
Yes.
From what you've said.
Yes.
So the question here is, this money that then is being borrowed for development, where is it going? Do we have, and I guess if we're trying to interrogate this, or if you were trying to interrogate this by the audit that you did, the question then should be, are there projects commensurate to this amount that you see in the books for which, these funds were borrowed? Can you say 1 trillion borrowed over time for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects? Can we see the commensurate project for which this money was borrowed, so that the tax money that you're talking about that should have gone towards paying debt is accounted for? Do you then see that this money which is in question, that there is a project that is attached shilling for shilling?
I don't think so. Because the only money you can attach to the project, which are actually attached to the project, is the development loans, which are captured in the Appropriation Act, because it is direct. It is direct. For example, if I looked at the Minister of the Treasury, National Treasury, the development for 2023, they had about 5 projects. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You find they had a project called Dogokuru Special Economic Zone, which was being funded by the government of Japan at 2 billion shillings. That is the loan from the government of Japan. And from our taxes, it's 584 billion shillings. A million shillings. Now, you see one thing, and that's the reason why I also say that the question of debt ceiling is unconstitutional.
What's wrong with that particular area there with the Dongokundu?
This is what I'm saying. You can see that one is pegged to a project.
Yes.
And if you go audit, you find that this money probably was used in the Dongokundu.
In the Dongokundu project.
But when you come now to the domestic debt,
they are not pegged to any specific project.
Is because they are not in the budget.
I see.
You see?
Bernard, this audit you've conducted between the years of 2014 to now, these are the years when you had already retired.
Yes.
The years prior, because you were in the treasury, let's say in the years before this, what was happening?
In terms of...
You actually retired 5 years ago.
Yes.
So that's around 2017, 2018.
Yes.
So in those first 5 years, because you're an internal auditor, were you seeing these things in the year, and were you raising questions as somebody whose job was to ask those questions?
That could have been done by those auditors in the National Treasury. I was working outside the ministries and what have you.
Okay.
Yes.
So ideally,
yes,
the auditors at the National Treasury should be raising these questions.
They should be raising these questions.
And also the Office of the Auditor General should be raising these questions.
Should also be raising these questions.
And these reports, because they are then submitted to Parliament, Parliament should also be raising these questions?
Yeah, in fact, this report, I recently appeared in the ADA, the Public Debt and Privatization Committee, and I gave them the same report, which was part of the memoranda I had sent when they asked for memoranda on the 2023 medium-term public debt strategy.
To the best of your knowledge,
Yes.
has this information that you found out been captured in the Auditor General's report?
I don't think so.
Ever?
I don't think so.
Why would it escape officials in the Auditor General's office over 9 years?
Probably the area they look at. Because I just got the published report from my expertise. I'm able, we say the cornerstone of fraud. The cornerstone of fraud is concealment. And probably that concealment, maybe somebody may not decipher it the way I may do it. Because you see now, like when I looked at these figures,
Yeah.
in the domestic debt, you look at this is we are paying revenue, we are borrowing. So the question arises.
So it could be a lack of expertise in the office of the Auditor General to be able to detect some of these things. So some of the recommendations would be that the Auditor General ought to then build and increase their capacity to catch on this as we conclude. Yeah? Bernard,
Yes.
you have shocked us this morning with all these revelations, and we thank you very much for coming to us.